This is episode 3 of the High Yield Podcast, and today's show is all about niches. The unfilled or underfilled niches, that piece of content you so desperately want, but it's just not provided. Joining me and Ravi this week is JaKaTaK and Lycan. Stay tuned.
SCV ready. What's going on?
Here with StarCraft discussions worth their weight in gold, it's the High Yield Podcast with your hosts Troy Pavlik and Fear Dragon.
Say, you got a real pretty mouth.
Welcome to another episode of the High Yield Podcast. I'm Troy Pavlik. Joining me this week with my co-host Ravi, we have Add 'em to your banana bread for that extra burst of flavor. It's Mr. Vanilla himself, Jared Lycan Williams. How are you doing, Lycan?
Fuck off. No, I'm kidding. I'm doing great, man. Thank you guys for having me.
Good to have you. We figured you'd be a good one for this topic. We'll get into that after we introduce our second guest, first for the High Yield Podcast. We're going new places. Straight out of Gold League, it's our favorite, Thomas JaKaTaK Labonte.
Yeah, man, straight out of Gold League, feeling pretty good, you know? Just won a couple of games with only Marines.
What have you been up to this week, JaKaTaK?
Oh, man, I've been editing my face off. Like, I don't have a face to talk to you anymore because I've only been editing and sleeping and eating for the past, I don't know, week. Then I came back from the Cheeseadelphia LAN, did some casting there, went to a wedding. It's been crazy.
Starcraft, it has a very active and broad community, much more so than other communities I tend to find. We have a wide variety of different content, and it's very easy to find different content in StarCraft. That being said, I personally notice, and I'm sure others have noticed, that there are niches in StarCraft that are just uncovered. And we're talking about those niches today. So we've asked everyone to come here with a niche in StarCraft content that they think is unexplored or underexplored, and we'd like to talk about this. JaKaTaK, you've been in StarCraft a while. You've done a lot of stuff between Tutorial Central and the new JaKaTaK TV. What do you have?
I've got a couple. I'm going to start with the big one. It's really, really hard to make content for new players and for low-level players, for casual players that are interested in improving, but just sort of stuck. That's kind of like 4 years ago, however long it's been. That's kind of the niche that I've always been seeking out and trying to help. I mean, the original reason why I got into StarCraft content was basically that I felt that all the content being produced was for like Masters plus level players. And I was like, well, what about the rest of us? You know, we want some content too. We want to improve too. And that it was mostly, you know, strategy based and people were, you know, dealing with the mechanics and stuff. It's really, really tough to have successful content that's targeted towards Gold Leaguers and below because they're hard to reach. They're, you know, a lot of times they're the people who don't browse Reddit, who aren't on Team Liquid. They just sort of play the game. They're having a good time, but a lot of times they drop out because they're frustrated or whatever it is, you know?
Does any of your stuff fall under the umbrella of content for lower league players? Stuff like your fast facts or, I guess, bronze science? Is that what you're talking about when you're talking about?
I did an experiment when I was with Tutorial Central, and I wanted to sort of capture the campaign player audience and make content that would help them transition from campaign into being competent 1v1 players. Because it's really easy if you don't have guidance to fall into really bad mechanical habits or just misconceptions about basic strategy and things like that when you're playing the campaign. And a campaign player, an unguided campaign player, can move from the campaign and say, oh, I did brutal campaign. I guess I'm pretty good. I'm going to play 1v1. And they totally get destroyed because it's this whole different world. So when I was with Tutorial Central, I tried to do this series that would go through the campaign, each of its missions, and give sort of a deliberate practice kind of a vibe to it without losing too much of the story and the enjoyment of it, and try to give a smooth transition from so players could build their skills in the campaign, move into 1v1. They're already, you know, Platinum League, something like that, and, you know, sort of feeling good. But the problem was I couldn't reach anybody that played campaign and only campaign. My target audience was unreachable. The only way that really I could have gotten to reach that audience was if I was in the client. And I've tried to make that happen before, but obviously Blizzard's super strict about what they allow and what they don't allow in their client, and getting that kind of access is really, really difficult.
You kind of said like you tried a couple of things. Like, what have you really tried besides, trying to get stuff into the client to reach out to that kind of audience? Because I know that is something that is really, really difficult when you tell people, hey, yeah, there's like this great YouTube series that can teach you how to play StarCraft. I know a lot of people that I've tried to direct toward those kinds of guides, and actually a lot of your guides themselves. And I said like, hey, this is a really great series. It'll help you get better and it'll help make everything a lot less frustrating. But they just say, well, I don't want to put in the time if I have to watch a YouTube series.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things, I mean, this goes for all content, not just when you're making for new players, is keep it short, keep it efficient. If you can tell someone how to do something in 5 minutes, do it in 5 minutes. If you can do it in 3 minutes, great, do it in 3 minutes. Cutting out all the bullshit, swear number one, out of the way, and just getting right to the meat of the issue, I think is really good. The other thing that I do, I have a lot of different StarCraft accounts. One of them I keep in bronze level MMR, and I just go into games and I will do various tests. One of the tests that I like to run is a worker rush. So just box all the workers and attack. And the way that works is, by the way, that wasn't my idea. That was someone else's idea, and I continue to test it, is that if you attack move with your workers and they don't know how to attack move on the ground, what they'll do is they'll attack and click on one of your workers, and all of their workers will try to just attack once. You'll always win. Even if you have a worker deficit, you'll always win. So you go into that game, play that out, and say, hey, this is an attack move. If you since you have more workers than me, you'll be able to win. All you have to do is issue an attack move. And like, oh yeah, I did that. And I'm like, oh well, actually, you can actually click on the ground instead, and you can use that with your attacking units too, with your army too, and you're gonna see a lot more success. And it turns out that I think the last time I tested this was about a year ago. You can still get into Silver League by only doing that test, basically. So there's this really big gap of super basic skills that people just are not getting in the very beginnings of StarCraft, which make the game very frustrating.
Do you think that's just Blizzard's role to manage that kind of thing, though? Because this actually sounds and reminds me a lot of one of the arcade maps that Blizzard actually released themselves called Starcraft Master, I think. Starcraft Master. And yeah, Starcraft Master was this great opportunity to teach players about some of the more subtle mechanics, as well as even just more blatant ones, such as, mineral walking. A lot of players don't really know that you can right click on a mineral patch and all of your workers will walk through other units. But it'll also even go to like super high level stuff, like the final challenge that was really well known, which is the challenge where you have a medevac and a siege tank, and you actually negate stalker shots as projectiles by lifting up the siege tank while the shot is still in the air, and it completely negates the shot. So that's a really, really high level mechanic that is very difficult to execute and very difficult to understand, but it still demonstrates that kind of knowledge. Do you think that some of the things would be better served not necessarily as a YouTube video, but as an arcade map or something of that sort?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I think that Blizzard does a lot of things really well, but the tutorial system for StarCraft 2 specifically, in my opinion, has always been lacking in a major way. I think Hearthstone does an amazing job with their tutorial system. When you open the game, you go through the whole tutorial system, and it shows you each of the mechanics and how they work, and it really extracts the sort of essential elements of the game while keeping it engaging, which is amazing to me. And I really think that kind of a style, not necessarily exactly, for what it is, but the idea of making an engaging way of showing or showcasing the mechanical and strategical ideas of StarCraft, so having something like that would be really great. I mean, like I said, part of the reason why I got into doing StarCraft content is because I felt that there was a big vacuous area that I could fill in. But ideally, yeah, that would be something that Blizzard would do in a tutorial that sort of, would be presented to the players, and it would help make StarCraft a lot less frustrating to play and a lot more fun.
The market you're talking about is the transition period from campaign to bottom of the ladder, campaign to bronze, like getting into the actual ladder system. You're not talking about improving from, say, bronze to platinum. Is that correct?
Well, I think that pretty much, I mean, it moves around, right? Sort of the stuff league, the league in which it doesn't matter what you make. As long as you make more stuff, you just overrun them. Sometimes it's gold to bronze, sometimes it's platinum to bronze, depending on how the divisions get cut up. But I think that area, the sort of stuff league area, is kind of one big place to hang out in. I don't want to take away from people saying, oh, I made it from bronze to silver. That's great. That's awesome. You should feel good about that. But that zone is kind of its own special place. And I think that for me, addressing that area and trying to help people in that area through content is kind of my niche area that I've been working towards reaching.
So do you think Day9 was filling this niche you're talking about?
I think Day9 mostly stuck to high-level strategy talk. Occasionally he talked about mechanics. I think Day9 was just such a brilliant person that doing something like focusing on bronze to gold league players, for the most part, wasn't worth his time. And he did the Newbie Tuesday thing, and all that content was really great. But I still think that there's sort of a hole there as far as, especially mechanics in the mechanical area. There's very few talk about mechanics. And that was still one of the major pitfalls of new players. They'll go in and they'll think, oh man, I should have made this decision or I would have won. It's like, well, no, you shouldn't have gotten supply blocked for 50 out of the 60 minutes of this game and you would have been okay.
So given that, and you've tried this a few times, the big question is, do you think that this content is sustainable or feasible? In that, do you think you can get enough sick esports dollars from making this to actually make it work? Because I'm sitting here and I'm opinion that I'm seeing right now is probably a no, pessimistically, sorry. Because at this point, you're fighting to get to a market. You're not trying to get the market to your content. You're just trying to get to the market itself. And I think that's a really rough place to be in if you want to make something work.
Yeah, for sure. It's totally not a profitable endeavor. It's not. I know it's not because we got our funding cut from Tutorial Central. And even then, Tutorial Central was heavily leaning on entertainment and things like that towards the end to try and get the view count up, try to make it a sustainable product. It's something that I'll probably be doing and maybe other content creators can probably be doing in their own spare time, but not as a way to sort of say, I'm going to get into this niche. It's going to be my one thing and I'm going to make money doing it. It's going to be successful. For me, the successful content that I do has always been entertainment based, whether it's, bronze science or fast facts, which I consider pretty entertainment based because most of the facts are similar to Brevi's 99% useless facts. And, music parodies and stuff like that have always been my most successful content. So if I can spend 80% of my time doing the successful content, I'm totally down to throw 20% at an area that I think maybe help out a couple of players that, are stuck in Bronze League or something like that.
One thing that I've been kind of wondering about is, how do you feel about other content producers that are in that same niche already? Like Filter SC comes to mind with his bronze, the original Bronze Masters player. Then there's obviously Day9, Troy talked about, maybe a couple of others. So do you feel like they're all struggling with the same problem? Or do you think that they found solutions and they found ways to make it at least a little bit more sustainable, but they ran into other issues?
Well, of particular note, Filter SC has left StarCraft like 11 billion times because he said he couldn't make it work. So there's that.
And I'm going to jump in here. First, what Troy said exactly. Filter's model was unsustainable, and if you have any slight understanding of how AdSense revenue works in this environment, he wasn't making diddly squat. He couldn't have eaten ramen and eggs to save his life off what he made from YouTube. And Day9 is gone, right? I'm not saying this pessimistically. I'm saying matter of factly. Day9 is gone for it until Atlas launches and he can not want to slit his wrist at the end of his workday. Day9 is not coming back to StarCraft 2. Was his model sustainable? Absolutely. But his model was not sustainable just because of content. It was sustainable because he was Day9. You can make the most amazing, perfect, beautiful piece of content that tells you how to do StarCraft 2, but you're only going to attract the people that are interested in learning and becoming a better gamer. Day9's model worked because he had Day9 at the head of it, right? Day9 was a funny guy. There were episodes. No one complained when Day9 took 20 minutes to tell a story, right? But take for instance my channel, right? If I take 20 minutes to tell some anecdote that has nothing to do with StarCraft 2 or it's just kind of whatever, no one wants to hear it because I don't have the personality of Day9. I'm not Day9. You know what I mean? So Day9's model was sustainable because he was Day9, but his content was also king, right?
I think that Day9 had a very diverse set of content as well. I think he had the high level strategic stuff was probably the bulk of what he did, and not the niche we're talking about, which is more low level mechanical or sort of basic fundamental area. And also, yeah, he was super funny. I mean, it's not just that he used to be a pro game. It's all of these factors coming together. He used to be a pro gamer. He understands the game in super high depth. He understands the mechanics and the strategy, and he made a variety of content. He had Fun Day Monday, which is arguably one of the most successful series in StarCraft. He did the Newbie Tuesday thing for a while, and then every day other than that was a super high level analysis of what's going on now in the StarCraft metagame, which I think hasn't really been replaced.
So what I found fascinating, and I hope that I'm not going to be misquoting this because this was a while ago. I do remember a poll being thrown out on his channel like a very long time ago when the daily was the main thing that he was doing. And I believe that the majority of his audience said that they were between like either Silver League or Gold League. So maybe not exactly that beginner transition audience, but still I would say that his audience was mostly amongst the lower league players. So I find that fascinating because he did somehow managed to captivate some of the lower league players, maybe not the absolute bottom. But the other thing is, if you talk to a lot of people who are maybe generally interested in gaming, they have heard of Day9 and they'll at least know something about him. Maybe this has become a little bit more prominent because he's done a lot of other stuff now. Like he actually hosted the PC gaming thing on E3. So he's gotten his name out there in other places, but people are more aware of him despite having a very casual interest in StarCraft. And I think that in and of itself is already fascinating. I know that Lycan already kind of talked about maybe why that is because of his personality and everything, but is that the solution then to try and make this sort of model sustainable, is to try and find some other hook?
It's the reality, right? If you look at other content creators in other communities, and I don't know if this is allowed, Troy, we didn't talk about this, but I'm about to bring up a different game.
Oh, man.
Whoa!
No, it's encouraged.
Okay. All right, yeah, fine. I'll let it pass.
If you look at League of Legends, right, there are plenty of content creators who make League of Legends guides that don't have Day9 level personality and have 500,000 views on their videos. Why? Because the content is highly desired. That's the other thing, right? And that was the other thing I said, is highly desired and personality. Those two drove Day9's content. In League of Legends, there is such a huge desire for content, right? The esport is still continuing to grow. So the reality is that it might just come down to the fact that StarCraft content isn't that big. There isn't a market for enough people that would just consume purely perfect content. You know what I mean? So take the personality out of it. I don't think there are enough people that want that content to come consume good StarCraft content, especially, when it comes to just tutorials. Now, real quick, let's look at JaKaTaK's videos, right? You remember those tutorial central things? Those were absolutely incredible. I watched every single one every time it came out. They were short, quick, to the point, and that's a different aspect to look at it, right? So we can look at personality, we can look at just, the kind of content and who wants to consume it, but then we can look at the model and the way it's put out. And JaKaTaK's tutorial central was quick, sweet, short, to the point videos. What, Jack? 3 to 5 minutes usually at the most?
Yeah, generally speaking, depending on the subject. We try to keep it as low as possible. Somewhere between 3 and 5 is good.
Exactly. Hyper consumable content is going to succeed far more than solid, extensive content. You have a 10-15 minute video, it doesn't matter how good it is if you don't have a base that desires that. Look at Vine. Look at how many stupid people go out there, and I'm sorry, not stupid, very intelligent people go out there and they make these 6-second funny videos, right? And they blow up. They're amazing. And then they'll release montages of the same videos people have seen, but those montages now have 12 million views and they've been shared on Facebook and YouTube and all kinds of other crap. That's because that kind of content, it's like, and it took them 6 seconds to watch. You know what I mean?
Speaking of content that makes you go haha and takes 6 seconds, Fear Dragon, how much karma have you gotten for the 99% useless facts? Because like you and I both know that was never intended to be this big, successful, long-running Reddit joke, but people freaking loved that.
So this is, and I hope JaKaTaK doesn't mind if we actually even just take this as an opportunity to transition into the topic that I wanted to bring up, the niche that I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
Because this is a nice transition point. So first of all, the karma, I don't even know. Like, it's an absurd amount. I think some hater on Reddit, thank you hater for doing the math for me, said like 95% of my karma came from those posts.
That was me.
Oh yeah, it was you, because I've already complained about this enough, but you post exactly like all of the trolls do. And except like, I know that you're being sarcastic because you're a friend. I consider you a friend, but it's hilarious because until I see the name, I actually can't tell the difference. So thank you very much, Troy. But that entire series was exactly a really, really good point. It's very, very quick, very easily consumable within quite literally, I mean, we're talking about like minutes for videos and stuff being good. This was in a matter of seconds, under 10 seconds, you can consume most of that. One of the problems being I absolutely put zero effort into any form of monetization. So there's that form of sustainability, I'll put in quote unquote, that is not really there. But if I bothered to monetize it, it would be fairly sustainable in that sense. The problem was I have no interest, and this is the moment where I'm going to actually say something that I've been avoiding saying for a while. I haven't posted one of those for like a month and a half.
I noticed.
Yes,
Nice.
a few people have probably noticed, but like occasionally I'll get like a message on Reddit or something and people like, hey, I got another useless fact for you. I'm like, that's awesome.
Useless fact guy.
Okay. Well, now you're just trying to piss me off. But the problem of reason why like I stopped posting them is just not because like I absolutely like it wasn't worth my time or anything like that, because I still felt like I actually got some really, really nice messages about it. And this is where we're going to go into my niche. A lot of people saying like, thank you for posting this. I know it seems like it's a really, really small and like useless thing, but it got me motivated. Like seeing that, you know, there's like this abusable thing of like, you can stack siege tanks with force fields in a 2v2 game. Like it got me motivated to go tell my friend to play StarCraft with me. And we started playing 2v2s and doing really dumb stuff. That is what I really think the big niche that needs to be filled is content that's about the game, not necessarily about the esport. And, you know, because, you know, there's a lot of content that we have out there that's about esports and getting people motivated to watch the esport and highlight videos that, you know, are coming out from SC2HL that make people want to tune in for the esport side of StarCraft. But there's not enough content that makes people just want to play. And this is actually, I think, something that transitions really well from JaKaTaK's topic, because I feel like one of the big problems that JaKaTaK was saying is that he has trouble reaching out to that lower league audience. And a lot of the reason for that is because a lot of the people on Reddit and Team Liquid, and this has been talked about time and time again, they like to watch the esports side of StarCraft, but they get very stressed out or they don't feel like playing StarCraft because they don't have as much fun with it. I think a lot of that is because we have such a heavy emphasis on StarCraft is esports. Like that is the definition of what StarCraft is the epitome of this great skill-based game, unless you talk to a couple of haters out there. But the idea is that there's this big niche for content that is just about the game. And it doesn't have to be, you know, like directly about, you know, guides or that kind of stuff. It can be a little bit more indirectly about the game. It can be like Carbot Animations is actually the number one example of this that I'm going to use because it's this unbelievable success story that is in this niche. But I think there's so much more room for more of that kind of content. Carbot Animations created this very silly and just kind of a little bit stupid, but incredibly awesome animated series that's just about small little interactions in StarCraft that are funny. It's just things that typically happen in games. And it makes people want to get involved. It makes people love StarCraft and want to get involved with StarCraft. Not the esport, StarCraft itself. And I think that if we can solve that problem, if you can get more people involved in that niche and solving, the problem of people not wanting to play as much. I mean, the market is there in the form of Reddit and Team Liquid. The market that JaKaTaK was saying is kind of not the market for those guides. You can turn them into that market for those kinds of guides of learning how to get better and learning how to play better. Like it's still a very difficult niche to fill, because I think that you have to be very creative, or you have to have some sort of skill set that you can apply and create this kind of content.
I think that's a big part of the success of Day9. Day9 was always talking about how to have fun in the game. I think the Fun Day Monday area fills in really nice with that Carbot sort of, this is content about the game, but it's not about the esport, because, Mass Raven, oh wait, never mind. Something else that's silly doesn't actually happen in a real game,
In the same vein, taking a trip back down memory lane, when I first started playing StarCraft, it was about 6 months after the release of Wings of Liberty, because I didn't have a computer that was powerful enough to play it on release. Up to that 6-month point, I watched basically all of HD StarCraft and all of Husky's videos on YouTube, because that was how I experienced the game vicariously through them. And then when I got the game, I was excited, and I was putting in my 8-hour days playing the game, stuck in bronze. I was stuck in bronze for, I think, like 5 months. The thing that I remember very clearly is I tried to go on Reddit, and I hated it. I'm like, why are they talking about all these Korean people? I want to talk about StarCraft. And even back then, I can remember being actively frustrated that it was about the esport, and I couldn't find anything about the game. I couldn't find any cool tricks about how to make my medevacs work better. I couldn't find any of that because the Reddit was more about the esports. Fast forward a couple years, I never play the game. My passion is dead, and I absolutely love seeing the drama on Reddit. But as a new player, as a player who is playing the game, it was exceptionally frustrating not to have any avenue, because Team Liquid is so hostile to the new player who doesn't know anything. Like, even if the community isn't hostile, just the site itself, it's overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could never go on Team Liquid when I was new. So I almost wonder if we lack the community gathering place to enable this type of content.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Jack, do you want to, I'm going to let you go for this, because we are both excited about this. All
right. I'm just going to say something really, really quick. This is like an announcement type of a thing, but I'm literally working on something like that and have been working on it for the past 6 months. And it's going to be out in beta relatively soon. And it's going to be all about StarCraft content, no drama, no esports, just StarCraft. This is something that I think needs to exist, an area where people can talk about StarCraft and have StarCraft content, where they can get to the content they need, the best content possible, and enjoy the game and all that kind of stuff, without all of the drama and the elitism, where it's a sort of a welcoming place where people can talk and have a good time.
There's a lot of people out there that don't get excited just because they see content that tells them this is the best way to split your Marines. And sometimes I think that kind of content can excite people. I know that one of the most exciting moments for me, in terms of like motivating for me to go play StarCraft, was Team Liquid's The Great Book of Protoss Bullshit. I'm not going to lie, I played the latter an absolute magnitude higher than I normally do, just because I was so excited about all of this bullshit that I could lay down on my opponents and how much frustration I could cause for them. And that was a guide, in a sense, that it was a guide on how to do particular build orders. But it was the manner it was presented, right?
That content there isn't a lot of that kind of content, though, for StarCraft, right? Like, you got to think that the world of StarCraft, there are just so many parts. It's not just building supply depots, pylons, and overlords. There is so much. You think of an entire full game, and you think of every decision you make. You think of everything available to you as a player. Think of a 20-minute game, right? So many things happen. So many things that come naturally, right? But that's not exciting. The the book of Protoss bullshit was exciting because let's be realistic for a second, okay? Executing cheese as a Protoss is easier than executing cheese as a Terran, and Zerg only has fucking 6 pool, right? So
Wow, the bitterness.
and a Roach Rush and
Someone
a
plays
Baneling Bust.
Terran.
But my point is that like the book of Protoss bullshit is something that you can get excited about. Like shoving a couple Dark Templars up your fucking opponent's ass. That's a lot of fun. That's really cool, right? Building a cannon in their base, that's fun. But there isn't a lot of learning content that can be unique like that. Now here we go. I'm gonna jump to another game. Let's look at Counter-Strike, right? Counter-Strike is a game that, while it's complex in a lot of ways, the number of things in the game are very few. People, guns, grenades, right? That's it. Yeah, each gun behaves differently, but for the most part, you're pointing, clicking, shooting. Grenades offer a huge amount of complexity. And if I think about something that I recently got excited about that was new educational content, was a 10-minute video explaining every single grenade on Mirage, which is a map for Counter-Strike, right? That was content that was educational. It's necessary. It builds fundamentals. I don't think that StarCraft has a lot of things like that can be fun to watch. Watching the guy running around and throwing the grenade, I can log into a server with bots, kill all the bots, and then throw the grenades myself, do it right after him. Like, I literally he'd throw one, I'd pause the video, go try that until I perfected it, move on to the next. StarCraft, aside from not having the environment to that easily get in there and practice things, StarCraft just doesn't have that kind of rewarding side to it when it comes to the learning process.
I don't know if I entirely agree. Like, I agree with portions of what you say, especially like the idea of StarCraft not really having that immediate feedback in terms of training and getting better at those kind of things. But I do think that there are a lot of those things. You mentioned that, Protoss has a lot of these kind of cool and just fun things to do, like the Cannon Rush, the Dark Templars. But I actually do think that there are a lot more things for Terran and Zerg that maybe aren't talked about as much, but are still actually a lot of fun to get that kind of, oh man, like they're never going to see this coming / like this is a crazy strategy. Like I think Nidus Worm's plays really come into mind. I actually think immediately when you were talking about that, about Total Biscuit and how much fun I had watching him, and actually I felt like playing Terran and doing this after watching him. He did like the infamous in-base proxy battlecruiser rush, which is just such a ridiculous idea, right? But like doing those kinds of things, or like a Thor rush. I remember back in the day when I was back on like Shattered Temple and Lost Temple, when those were maps that we played, there was the Thor rush where you just make one Thor and you'd pull a ton of SCVs and you would just kill your opponent with a Thor and SCVs. And if you were better than I was, which wasn't very difficult, you would also include some Marines in there. But the idea was like, it was just like this, it was like a power hero unit, and that was exciting for me. And I think that there are still those kinds of things that are exciting. We have to dig a little bit deeper for them, but I do think that there is that niche. And I guess like I feel as though it doesn't have to be an incredibly simple system. Like I agree, Counter-Strike is a great example of that, but as a counter example for that would be a lot of the MOBAs. I know that I get excited. I'm a big Dota player, and I get excited when I read about or I see on like our Dota some crazy, cool, weird interaction of skills that maybe involves like 2 or 3 different heroes. And I say, like, I grab 2 or 3 of my buddies and I say, look at this. This looks insanely broken right now. Like, I don't understand how it's not even been patched out of the game yet. Let's go abuse the hell out of this, because this looks like fun. I'm going to make some people upset tonight. I'm going to drive some people like drink tonight or something, because it's fun. It's still complex, though. It exists in a very complex system with a lot of interactions.
I think I couldn't disagree more with both Ravi and Lycan simultaneously.
This is going to be fun. I'm ready.
First, I'll get to why I disagree with Lycan. Your example of using like the grenades and experimenting with that instantly, and you have this simple mechanic, but you get to use it in complex ways that really show how to have fun with the game, and you can do really cool things with it. That's sort of what I'm understanding your point is. right? You can see this tutorial that says this is how you use the grenade, and then you can envision creative uses for the grenade and try it out.
Right. I'm saying that's exciting versus, there's limited things that can be exciting like that. Like you can't make a video about this is how to not get supply blocked. Like I don't see a player getting excited. Like this is how to carpet bomb. Like that's more like you need to know how to do that. You know what I mean? That's when I get excited about a filter. When he makes a StarCraft video that's like, there's something I need to learn. There's the video. That's when I'm excited. But I don't just get excited like, oh, someone made a new tutorial. Like Jack's stuff was entertaining because it was usually shit I didn't know. But just in general, learning StarCraft tutorials, I don't think are exciting.
So, good. I'm glad that we clarified that because I still super disagree with you. Now, to address why I disagree with Ravi, because they combine, you're unnecessarily adding complexity. In-base battlecruiser rush, that's not a thing that's viable. That's not like a cool high-level play. It's something that's fun to do. It's something that can be cool and fun to play with. But it's not something that's going to get you to that higher level of play. It needs to be things that you can apply and progress in the game by using, but it is still fun and interesting to watch. And I have the perfect example of it because it's happened to me personally, and I was so excited about it. It happened in SC2 CTL Season 2. Drunken Boy was playing a game, and it was on Ohana. He did this really OP siege tank position, and he just demolished the other player. And then in Game 2, he found a different position on the same map, and he demolished it with a siege tank. And I'm like, this is really cool. This interaction between the siege tank and the map, positionally, just on this one map, in this one scenario, I think it's cool how we can use siege tanks to such a great advantage. I'm going to play around with this. And for the next 3 hours, me and my friends, we were in customs. We were trying to fuck each other over with siege tanks. And it was a lot of fun. And I was looking up and couldn't find any tutorials that are like, you want to make your opponent frustrated on Ohana, place your siege tanks here. I think that kind of content would be exceptionally exciting. You could do it in 2 to 3 minutes. It'd be quick, it'd be exciting, it'd be relevant, and it would definitely help players of all levels. Maybe not the high GM players, but rate everything up from Diamond to Masters. Sure, they can benefit from these siege tank positions. The people in Bronze League, they can position their siege tanks there. It's not hard. They can do that, and it's not boring. It's exciting, and it's relevant. And I think that's the kind of content that succeeds. And that's why I think that it can be done in StarCraft. It doesn't need StarCraft's complexity. It just gives you this wide berth of opportunities to do all sorts of things. That's why I think this kind of content is infinite. Just a small situation of positioning this one unit on this one map, because for every map in the map pool, you can do that video. There's such a wide expanse.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with everybody.
Ravi,
he was disagreeing. Ravi, you go first, please.
Okay, so the only thing that I really want to say before JaKaTaK goes is just that I don't disagree with the overall premise of what you're saying, but the only thing that I do disagree with is that I don't think that has to be the ultimate objective, is to get people better. I think that there's a lot of value, and this is kind of what we were talking about before with Day9, and like the idea of like emphasizing fun, is that you get people having fun playing the game, and then you worry about improvement, because improvement is the following step after you end up having fun and you enjoy the game and you want to play it more. Improvement comes after. If you're trying to get people to improve before they're having fun, then that is not a sustainable model for having people like continue play the game. JaKaTaK, go.
All right, cool. So first of all, addressing the idea of playing weird strats, Protoss book of bullshit. TLO recently had an article that I think was really, really awesome. He said something along the lines of, you should play StarCraft the way you want to play StarCraft, the way it's enjoyable for you to play StarCraft, not, confining yourself to playing like a professional player. I think people are too hung up on the idea of, is this thing that I'm doing viable or not viable? It's sort of like, I'm in Diamond League. I don't have to play the exact way the pro player plays. I can do this crazy build, and guess what? It's going to get a lot of wins. It's going to get some losses too, but who cares? It's wild.
Are you sure you disagree with me?
Well, no, I was making a joke. I totally don't disagree with you, okay. Ravi. Sorry.
Okay, perfect.
I couldn't help it, man. It was just like this pyramid of disagreement, and I didn't want to ruin the pattern. And I think, though, moving on from that, the idea of relevant content that's like useful but also engaging, I think that's why something like 99% useless facts or fast facts are really successful is because they're a little bit useful in very specific situations. Technically, you can use them. So you're like, oh, okay, save it for later. But it's something, A, that you didn't know before. And I think that's really, really important. And B, is just sort of silly. It's like, wait, when is that ever going to happen? Like, wait, really? You can chrono boost a building and it moves faster? What's all that? It's crazy and fun. And then you're sort of like, oh, wait, I'm going to go do this thing. But I think that I'm very much in line with Ravi about the idea that first comes the fun and the enjoyment of the game, and that's where you grow your passion for StarCraft. That's where you grow the love of StarCraft. And then when you're ready, you move on and you say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and you know what? I want to get to plat. All right, I'm going to practice hard. I'm going to move up the chain, because really when we talk about improvement, the number one thing that's going to lead you to improvement above anything else is consistency. Playing the game. People make a joke of that, right? Like, oh, just play the game and you'll get better. It's like, well, that's a little bit misleading, but there is some merit in that consistency in physical training or StarCraft training or just skill development, learning a language, whatever it might be. Consistency is so powerful, so much more powerful than, any other training method that exists.
I still don't necessarily, all of what you're saying is valid.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He needed your validation.
I needed the stamp of approval. I feel better now.
Lycan,
Yeah.
what did you bring to the table?
First of all, I want to comment that I see what you fuckers are doing, right? I see what this is. You bring JaKaTaK and me on here, and we're just going to give you our ideas, and the next thing you know, brought to you by fucking Troy and Ravi, it's going to be the ideas that JaKaTaK and Lycan brought up. This isn't even going to air. This is going to be burnt and destroyed.
Hey,
So-
Lycan, let's not get about the back seat, or the back door, stabbing that we do to each other, okay? I know that we are bitter enemies to the end, but let's not get that involved in the public right now.
Right?
Yeah, esports is all about shit-talking each other behind backs and then being nice in front and on.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah. There's so much animosity in this chat right now. I'm kind of sweating about it. I'm uncomfortable.
Lycan, you had a second
So
point.
I think that we need, and this is going back to esports, I think we need statistical analysis, and I don't think we have it. Nor do I think we have a way to quantify it. You can look, we talked about this in the late game today. You can look at so-and-so in best of X rounds. You can look at so-and-so against X race in best of X rounds. You can look at so-and-so against X race on best of X rounds on X map. But you cannot quantify the strengths, weaknesses, and success of a StarCraft 2 player the way you can in other games and in other sports. And I don't like that. Do I think that it's not possible? No. But I think we then have to look even deeper. What about X player against X race against that race on this map in the first 5 minutes before X tech, before whatever? And I think that's completely possible. I think it would take a lot of work from analysts to get there, but I don't think there is enough depth to the game, right?
Well, the in-game metrics, you mean, that were provided in the game?
Well, not just in-game metrics, but I also think that there's a lack of effort from the analysts in the StarCraft community, right? Like when people were to go, and let's say that Maru's coming up and it's another pro league, and let's say we're 3 months ago and Maru's style was actually still working, right? You know what, an analyst is going to come up and they're going to say, hey, you know what? It's Maru. He's been kicking butt in TVP, and he's going up against so-and-so. It's a person that seems to be relatively even matched, but Maru is just on fire against Protoss, and he's got that Maru style without Vikings. And then they'll say, this is why that style is strong, or this is why that style works, right? But they never really quantify why Maru is able to beat that player. All they're going to do is they're going to look at the most recent results and just kind of off a hunch, right? Like, 4 out of 5 times he's beat Protoss, and he's going up against a Protoss he's beat relatively recently. I don't think that's enough. I think there needs to be more, and it needs to be deeper. And when someone says that so-and-so is going to go 3-2 in a round, or they're going to 3-0 someone, I want to know more than just, well, recently they've done that to other people.
You need to talk to Dave Gowerly, man. I'm telling you.
Spawning tool!
The stuff that Dave Gowerly, not spawning tool, the stuff that Dave Gowerly can do with StarCraft is absolutely nuts. He can tell you where a player tends to put their pylons, where they tend to put their tech, and at what time, how often they died of Widow Mine drops that have 4 or more Widow Mines. Like, the amount of data and analysis that Dave Gowerly of the Sandbox, free advertisement there, check out the Sandbox, sweet, analytics. We're helping Pulp prep for the next tournament he's going to be in BlizzCon. Anyway, but Dave Gowerly can do crazy stuff with StarCraft. I think the main thing is that it's not really out there, and we're working on, publicizing that. But I think that there are probably other really high-level analysts, replay analysts, that can give that kind of a data. But when we talk about sustainability, it's like, who's going to pay for that stuff? I was really, really close with the guy who developed GG Tracker, and he barely made enough money to cover the cost of the server for GG Tracker. And it was and still is a fairly popular
so that's
site.
The thing is, right. And so if you compare that to let's talk conventional sports, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Conventional sports has so many people interested that it pays for ESPN to log those results and to post them on their website, right? I mean, I've never looked up, batting, what do you call it, averages or ERA or whatever. I don't know. I've never looked that up, but I could, because there's a reason to. There are a lot of sites that have the Counter-Strike statistics, like, the KDA of players. I can go back and I can find that data. Now, I'm still getting into Counter-Strike, so I'm not 100% sure, but I also think some things are missing from Counter-Strike, like gun statistics, purchases, and if they lose the pistol round, who's going to purchase, like what team often, like, but we know that Team Envious, we know that they like to force buy a lot, and it's just something that you see a lot. But with StarCraft, like you said, who's going to pay to put that stuff up? And also, it's a matter of actually someone committing to putting the analysis in there. There aren't enough people interested, either A, because they don't realize that they'd be interested in that, or B, because it would take a little bit of time, and we don't have enough people interested to guarantee that we have a constant flow of that data without a break.
Conventional sports is insane. I was watching American football, and the stats that they come up with, like, it seems like every 5 minutes someone just broke a new record, or someone just made it to this next level of thing, because everyone's tracking 1,000 different stats, and whenever the important ones hit, they send it to the casters, and the casters are like, oh yeah, this person just actually, Tom Brady just moved into 5th for the all-time passing blow. It's crazy. And I think that maybe WCS needs that kind of a thing. Well, or not needs, but just it would benefit from having dedicated statisticians and analysts to be feeding the casters or feeding like the desk people this kind of information as it happens.
The one thing that I think is a fundamental difference between, say, StarCraft and conventional sports, let's take baseball. You have things like batting averages. You know that it's good to hit a home run. I think that's pretty clear to everyone. You know that it's good to not foul a ball. Singles, doubles, there's a conventional ranking to what hit is conclusively better than what other hit. You know that if you can run fast, you will naturally take more bases than someone who can run slow. You know catching fly balls is good. That can all be quantified very easily, and you can have people crunching the hard numbers and inputting data and then doing the ESPN thing and producing stats that matter. The problem that I see instantly is, what makes someone good at StarCraft?
And that's exactly it. There are things that you can quantify, but there are very few things. The rest is nuanced.
I think
I disagree with that.
Quantify. There are tons of things that you can quantify. Coming right to the surface would be perception action cycles per minute, action latency, cost efficiency and engagement, and then you can break that down between unit compositions.
There are players like Polt who he's notorious for having extremely low but extremely efficient APM.
Yeah.
So like you'd have to then you can't just say, well, this is their actual actions per minute.
Well, APM is the worst of them all. APM just is like the very tip of the iceberg. I think action latency, perception action cycles is way bigger. Cost efficiency and engagements is way, way, way bigger.
Yeah, but you have to. So cost efficiency, yes, I could agree with that. If you're looking at cost efficiency of Widow Mines versus Zerg, like of course a Widow Mine is going to be more cost efficient if that's how you're measuring the engagements. And that's the thing. You have to. It's not just black and white. It's not just person steps up to bat. He either hits it, he doesn't, or he takes 2 swings and then always hits it on the third. Like
Well, I think you have multiple levels of that, right? So you can have a main stat that basically says in TVP, Pult is on average 55% efficient, more efficient than his opponent for units lost in this matchup. And then you compare that to say most Terrans are 54% or most Terrans are 23%. Holy crap. And then, like you said, you can get deeper. You can go like, okay, in a bio Widowmine game, Life is the absolute best at wasting his opponent's Widowmines with the least amount of resources lost. You can get really deep into it, but you also have that top level as well. I think all of those statistics are interesting and can be injected into the experience.
So I absolutely agree with that. And the issue though is that we are never going to get it to the point where all StarCraft no, I lied. All right, so here's how we'll do it, right? If someone finally develops an app that is simple, easy, and that doesn't get the ding it accusation of being fucking malware, so it's going to have to be sponsored by Blizzard or ESL, or everyone else is just going to, I don't know. Anyway, the point is that you create that application, and what happens is it's a parser, right? It gets installed on the computer. It's very lightweight, and all it does is it parses those replays and it sends them to the whatever central database is actually making the statistic site, right? So whatever thing is going to extrapolate all the data and say, you know, Widowmines killed X and this engagement, whatever data points we have, the only way that we will get a true grasp of this information is if we get a tool like that makes it so that Blizzard, ESL, DreamHack, Fragbite, Gfinity, and anyone else who's running a tournament that has our pros playing in it, all this data can be collected.
StarCraft is uniquely advantaged compared to conventional sports in this regard. Because in conventional sports, you have to record things, you have to get camera angles, and you have to have people physically watch it and then do computations on it. StarCraft replay files record every player's every action. Granted, if you want to do things like eye tracking and heat maps and all that, then you need some external software. But for the most part, we can do the heavy analytics beyond what we can dream just with the StarCraft replay file. The problem is that I really don't think there is people answering the question enough, what makes someone good at StarCraft? And you mentioned JaKaTaK, David Georg, the guy who created it, and it's been long enough and he's sort of left the project open source. I think I can mention it. One of the things he was working on, creating an automated StarCraft coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was analyzing, he was working, and he was answering the question, what makes someone good at StarCraft, and what specific concrete things can we improve and that we can automatically use to coach? And if that was complete, this wouldn't be a problem, because the data that we're asking for, why is a player better than another player in any matchup, in any specific scenario, would have been solved because this software would have been processing it. Unfortunately, it never came to pass because the money wasn't there. And I think Lycan's right. I don't think the money will ever be there because this is a really hard problem.
I think that the biggest thing, the biggest project that came very close, or the closest probably so far to answering that question, I don't think we'll ever have a definitive answer. We'll just have a closer and closer perception of what's probably what makes one player better than the other. Is the Skillcraft CA project, which introduced the idea of perception action cycles and action latency and different things like that. But yeah, I think that it's definitely something that we're working towards, and it is falling into the category, a very niche thing to do. And I guess it is content, like statistics, providing statistics for people is content. And that's very, very niche. And I think it's mostly non-profitable kind of thing, but we've got our spawning tool. I think spawning tool is really great. Obviously, it can make a lot of improvements, but the fact that you can go ahead and see, okay, these are the premier level, all the premier level games. These are the current tendencies of the meta. These are the builds that are winning, losing, etc. I think that we can, we're always going to be improving. But obviously, the main thing that would accelerate that would be something like, okay, Blizzard hires spawning tool and says, all right, you're doing all of WCS, all of Premier everything, and you're feeding statistics to everyone. We're going to pay you to do it.
The problem is whoever does this has to create their own market for it. And I think the way that you do that is kind of a little bit of what JaKaTaK was saying, where you because you mentioned if Blizzard hires someone out, but I want to turn the phrasing of that a little bit differently, because that almost implies that Blizzard is the one that should be seeking out someone who can do this. I think that someone needs to step up to the plate. Maybe they don't approach Blizzard. Maybe they approach ESL. Maybe they approach, I was going to say GOM, but, Africa, I guess, or, Kespa, or, whatever tournament organizers. It's about creating your own market and creating a job for yourself, because there's definitely, I guarantee you, just based off of constant productions that I've seen throughout all the esports broadcasts we've had for StarCraft, people love, and when I say people, I mean production companies and ESL and DreamHack and GSL especially, because I know they used to do this. They love including statistics in their overlays, feeding them to the commentators. The commentators absolutely love when someone else is just giving them a bunch of statistics that they can rely on, because it helps them with their work. Because right now, statisticians don't really exist, at least to my knowledge, in StarCraft for commentators. When commentators want to do research, they have to do it themselves most of the time. And sometimes, they'll end up sharing it amongst each other. But that is a huge problem right now that I actually think there is a market for, if you go and just proactively reach out to these companies and say, hey, I can do this. I can create these statistics and say like, hey, I can provide you these statistics if you just give me the replays. I've written this program. Obviously, there's an upfront investment in time.
You're severely underselling that upfront investment.
Well, so I have been looking into replay formats and like parsing everything, and just based on existing technologies, and I agree, I'm not going to try and oversimplify this. This is obviously a very difficult task, but a lot of the work has already been done by things like GG Tracker and like a couple other programs. They have at least laid the groundwork, and a lot of this stuff I think you can actually do relatively easily. And the idea is the very, very basic statistics exist. And the challenging part, and the part that you would be able to sell to other companies of why you would be able to do this and they won't be able to themselves, is you need to take those numbers that already exist that we can immediately, very easily parse out of replays, or someone else has already done the groundwork for parsing out of replays, and you hook into, say, GG Tracker or whatever programs, and you actually just take that another step further. You say, okay, well, I have the APM, but what about APM, 10 to 15 seconds after a command was issued to unload a drop? What is the player's APM right after they're dropping? And I think that a lot of this, again, like I can't emphasize this enough, a lot of the groundwork has been laid out already by people who have tried to do this, but haven't taken it to that next level. And the two things that are missing is the interpretation of some of those analytics. And the second thing is proactively reaching out to these organizations or commentators or whoever, because I guarantee you there are going to be some very interested parties. GSL used to have a dedicated statistician. I don't know how they did it, because a lot of the statistics, I'm not going to lie, seemed like they were gathered manually, but they had some amazingly good statistics back in like 2011, 2012. I remember Tastosis reading some of them out, and they were really cool, and they would spark a lot of discussion for Tastosis. It would generate interest. It would generate stories. They would build off of it so well. And I cannot emphasize how much I feel like this is a possibility to do. I don't think that there's this unfeasible goal. I don't think it's unsustainable, but it does require at least some initial effort in figuring out how to create like almost a demo project to present to companies like ESL and DreamHack, and presenting in a way such that you're going to sell it as, look, this is something that's going to improve your product significantly. I'm going to be able to improve your broadcast and set you a level above other people's broadcasts if you partner with me.
I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and I 100% agree with you. To think back way in the beginning of the dark ages of StarCraft Wings of Liberty beta, all the casters were their own observers. Like that's, the observer as a job became a thing at some point. And I think that, in Brood War, that was already a thing. So it's like, okay, maybe we're moving on beyond that. But I think it is kind of part of this natural evolution where right now the casters are currently the statisticians and the casters as well. They do all that research, especially like Apollo and Fenner and all these different people who have come up who are really analytical people, just come with books and documents and all this stuff of just stats that they've gathered or research that they've done, so that way they can have those moments where like, yes, 4 barracks, he's going mech, and things like that. Just so much data that's gathered and work that's done that is not seen and unused, and that's all in the casters right now.
The only barrier is the statistician part. You need to come up with the stats. You need to come up with what makes a player good and what makes this relevant. And that's the thing I'm lacking, because Ravi's right. Graylin Kim's SC2 reader, it's a project on GitHub. It's a Python project that does replay processing, and it does it magically. It has been around for years, and it's only gotten better. So once you have the data that you want, it is trivially easy, assuming you're a software developer, to write the software to do it.
Python's an easy language to learn. Also, you don't even need... Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Python is basically writing English onto a screen and then telling the computer run it.
Anyone who's ever had trouble with Python is like hating you right now. Be like, man, I tried it.
No, screw you. You didn't try hard enough. Okay, like you're talking to two software developers right now.
Future run this. Anyway, slightly off topic, but yes, I agree, and I concede the point that it's probably easier than I gave it credit for, but I still think it's a hard problem that could be solved. You're right. There's a market for this. There's a definite market.
Here is the point that I think I didn't really quite touch upon, even though I was thinking about it before I started that giant diatribe on this whole topic. But it's the idea that you don't actually have to come up with some hard, concrete definition of what makes a player better, or what was the statistical number that decided why another player beat some other player.
You just need to make 99% useless facts about the player's gameplay, and then people get interested.
And then you make 98% useless facts.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, your joke is not entirely inaccurate, but things like, what is someone's APM when they have a drop, like the 10 to 15 or maybe 20 seconds after a drop happens? What is their APM? Or whenever you have an action of a medevac unload, when that medevac unload happens, what is the average number of workers that end up dying in the following minute? I actually think that's not something that's easy to gather from a replay. But, I mean, things like that, if you can have those kinds of numbers, you can statistically say, like, maybe it's not the reason why they won, but that's something that you talk about as a commentator and say, like, hey, look, did you know, like, we ended up seeing a lot of workers die, and that's because such and such player actually on average tends to kill 37 workers every single time they unload a medevac. Like, that is a statistic that you can throw out and you use. And here's the thing, your job as a statistician is to find statistics that are relevant to the game. It's the job of the commentators to do something with it. It is not the job of the statistician. That is a really hard word to say.
The stats guy.
To the stats guy. It's not the job of the stats guy to come up with the entire analysis and explain why such and such player is the better player numerically. It is the job of the statistician to come up with the statistics that are relevant, and the commentators, they're going to build that into what they were either talking about, or that's going to become the storyline that they're building. That is what is so important about the statistics, and why I think that you don't have to do all of the heavy lifting as a stats guy. I think that the commentators are there to back you up, and I say this as probably a shitty commentator, but a commentator nonetheless.
I think that a big part of making any stat interesting is just giving it context. Like, this player is the number one workers killed per game player in the competing in the top 16 right now. It's like, this is, or if we can find any outliers, it's sort of like, yeah, they kill average 33 workers a game, and then person that's closest to them is at 16. It's like, whoa, this person really favors harass.
Typically, when everyone brings things to the table, I forget to do me. Not going to happen today, because I brought a niche that's unfilled in StarCraft, and it sort of brings the podcast full circle, because it's tangentially related to what Ravi said at the beginning, and that's because StarCraft is one of the examples of my niche content. And I think that scripted, edited content is something that needs to exist. And When I say scripted and edited, I mean excessively scripted and edited. Starcraft is a great example because it's got the hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube because it's accessible. It's funny because you've played Starcraft, but you don't need to have played Starcraft, or you can have played Starcraft once and you can get it. It's silly. The Marine has a patch on its butt. That's a joke that's pretty universal. Other than that, what content is there in the Starcraft community? Like, what is there that's either edited or produced or in any way, like, sort of planned content?
YouTube.com/JaKaTaK
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because you're one of the people that does the same thing. Here's the question I have for you. Do you think if you eschewed Tutorial Central, you eschewed JaKaTaK TV, the Fast Facts, Bronze Science, whatever, and you just casted. You took all the hours you put into that stuff and you opened a Twitch channel and you casted games of StarCraft. Do you think you would be, quote unquote, further ahead than where you are right now?
Especially for YouTube, the way that the YouTube algorithms work is that they value minutes watched. So best of series are incredibly powerful on YouTube. I casted a random best of series on not even the Legacy of the Void mod with Cats, and I forget who played against Cats, but it was a best of 7, and it creates this hook where you watch the first game and then you want to find out how the rest of it goes, so you keep watching. So that's out of the 170 or so videos I've done on JaKaTaK TV so far, a lot of which are scripted, planned to the T things. That is actually one of my top 3 performing pieces of content, and it took me no time to do it all. And it was an awful cast. It was one of my first casts, and it was really poorly done. The quality is awful, and yet it is one of my best performing YouTube videos. I absolutely think if I was just casting all the time, that I would be a lot more successful. The other thing is that you need to be able to put out a certain amount of content per week. Otherwise, YouTube will cut your subscribers out of the loop. So say I make one video every 2 weeks, I lose all my subscribers every 2 weeks because I'm not making content often enough. So especially for YouTube, which is obviously what I'm familiar with about the inner workings of it, it's really hard to like take a lot of time and effort and make one really good video once in every 2 weeks and be successful, compared to just busting out a cast or a series of casts every single day. It's going to be more consistent. It's going to be more successful based on the way that at least that YouTube works. And I imagine that would be also a more successful model on Twitch as well.
Ravi, I already know the answer to you, so I'll just answer for you. The breaking out section of Breaking Out /Invitational, it always has performed significantly worse than the actual just casted tournament section, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Average viewership, just for context, average viewership for the last Breaking Out Invitational, like I think on the finals day or like on some of the higher viewership days, was anywhere between like around 1,000 and 2,000 viewers, also partially thanks to Base Rate TV hosts. But average viewership for the show itself, which takes significantly more time to produce, it was probably, I want to say, average around 50 viewers.
It was one of my goals with StarCraft Jeopardy to try and make a case for the viability of produced content, because each episode of StarCraft Jeopardy took about 11 hours to make all the questions, plus all the time I spent on software, but we're calling that a sunk cost. So with 11 hours per episode, I get a 40-minute batch of content. Overall, the results of my experiment are inconclusive. It was sustainable. StarCraft Jeopardy made more than it lost. I had people who wanted to donate to it. I had people who Patreon subscribed me. So the reason it stopped was not because it wasn't sustainable. I think that there is a sustainable market for this produced and edited content.
I agree that there is a potential market for it. I think back to all the EG videos that they would release for either hype trailers for like a new player announcement or just like for fun. I think one of my favorite ones is EG Falling, which was just such a great documentary. It was a very funny. It had a bunch of like the personalities and stuff. It was a short edited content. It garnered an enormous number of views. Now, granted, that was also an announcement for Stefano joining Evil Geniuses, but like that kind of content is actually really great. In fact, I'm also thinking about the Kingston HyperX videos.
Yep.
They were straight up advertisements for products. That was their entire purpose in being. But they did it fantastically well. In fact, I think that there were a couple that I found hilarious enough that I would randomly think of it and I would go back and rewatch it just because I wanted to go experience that content again because I thought it was funny. So that kind of content, I think that there is definitely a market for it. It is risky. And I think this is just true with, quite frankly, almost anything in life that doesn't have that immediate payoff of you do something and while you're actually doing it, you get that immediate feedback of how successful you're going to be at it. That's one of the big problems with edited content is you don't know how successful you're going to be with it. And you can try and send the video or like the unfinished content to friends or other people to try and get some sort of immediate feedback. Or
it's really time consuming to do. I try to do that for a while. It is really hard.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult.
In the case of Sons of Starcraft, you can actually just release the unfinished product and call it.
Oh man. So like
rabbit holes.
Oh, that's like a whole separate topic that we're not going to talk about.
We're not going to get into
because documentaries are not a niche in StarCraft that needs to be filled right now. But I think that it is something that is possible. I agree with both Troy and Jack here that it's something that could be done. But in terms of initial investment, it's difficult. Now, what I will say is that something that I'm going to steal something that Troy said to me before the podcast and make myself seem smart, even though I just credited him to it, is that there are things that you can do to minimize the amount of risk or investment. For example, one thing that was really cool about how the guild was filmed was that they revolved around this idea that a majority of the production and the scenes that were done was actually just people sitting in front of their computer with webcams. And they had a whole video layout that actually relied on this idea of you're looking at people's webcams because that is supposed to be, that's built into the story. That becomes a very low cost thing. In fact, that is very equivalent cost, I would say, to running a show like The Late Game or something, some sort of video podcast show. The only difference is there is a scripted content. They probably have to do multiple takes. There's still a lot of editing that goes into that, but it reduces the amount of investment. I think that there are tricks that you can use like that to reduce the initial risk. And as long as someone is creative enough, I think that you can produce that kind of content on a lower risk budget.
I totally think that time is the main cost for sure. More so than money. I do think it's
but
time.
We're StarCraft. Our time is worthless.
What does that even mean?
It means if you sum up the amount of time you've spent in StarCraft and how much profit you've made, the only result is we're all going to get very, very sad.
Oh yeah, I've done that calculation. I think I make like 60 cents an hour.
One thing I want to emphasize for anyone that is looking to fill any kind of niche, be assertive with whatever you want to do, and don't be afraid if that market doesn't exist or you think, oh, there's no job for that because I don't see a job for that. Create the job yourself. There are the most successful people, not just in esports, but in life, are the people who find something that they want to do and they make it a job. They make an opportunity for themselves. They don't look for the opportunity that exists. They make it. Just be assertive and proactive about pursuing your niche.